My name is Christina Curry and I'm the Mayor of Bayside Council and your host for this evening's panel discussion on responding to and preventing family and domestic violence. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, water and culture. I am currently on the land of the Gadigal Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. Before we begin tonight, I would like to take a moment to mention that if this panel discussion becomes distressing for you, or if you need support in regard to sexual assault, domestic or family violence, you can call 1800 RESPECT. That's 1-800-737-732 for 24/7 phone and online services. If you, a child or another person is in immediate danger, please call 000. In Bayside, we are aware of 3 recent domestic violence deaths in our area, and I'm sure you will all agree that this is simply unacceptable. Family and domestic and sexual violence is a major health and welfare issue nationally and in our community, occurring across all socioeconomic and demographic groups. But predominantly it does affect women and children, and the statistics show that. These types of violence can have a serious impact on individuals, on families and on communities, and can inflict physical injury, psychological trauma and emotional suffering. These effects can be long-lasting and can affect future generations. In the 12 months to 31st of December 2021, there were 620 incidences of domestic and family violence in Bayside. That represents 341 incidences over 100,000 people in Bayside. This represents an increase of approximately 4% over a 5-year period and ranks Bayside at number 74 for the highest rates of domestic and family violence in New South Wales. Bayside, unfortunately, it outranks neighbouring LGAs. Georges River is ranked 93rd and the Shire is ranked 92nd. But the purpose of tonight is to, first of all, increase awareness of domestic and family violence, understand the signs of domestic and family violence, also to inform how you can support someone experiencing domestic and family violence, and also to make you aware of Council's draft Domestic and Family Violence Action Plan and encourage your input into it. So to discuss this really important issue, we are fortunate to have an expert panel with us who are going to delve into this topic, and I'd like to thank them all so much for volunteering their own time to be here tonight with us. First of all, let me introduce Superintendent Cramsie, who has been a police officer for almost 30 years and currently holds the position of Commander at St George Police Area Command. However, is currently on secondment to the New South Wales Police Domestic and Family Violence Registry. As Commander at St George, Superintendent Cramsie manages over 300 staff and has the additional duties of domestic and family violence sponsorship of the Sydney Metropolitan Region. Welcome, Superintendent Cramsie. Also with us is Sallianne Faulkner, a Sans Souci local and the General Manager of Bayside Women's Shelter, a shelter that provides a safe and secure home for domestic and family violence survivors within our local community. Sallianne has been a resident of Bayside for nearly 30 years and was a Rockdale Local Woman of the Year in 2020. Sallianne wears several hats, but the Bayside Women's Shelter merges her full purpose and doing good ethos as she is thoroughly enjoying being able to assist in making a real difference in our community. Thank you, Sallianne. And we welcome Valentina Angelovska, who is the Chief Executive Officer of To Connect Youth and Community. To Connect is a leading specialist community organisation in Bayside and has provided a range of diverse and innovative services and programs for over 32 years. To Connect aims to empower people to create change for positive futures. Thank you, Valentina. And lastly, we welcome Carrion. Arely was recently appointed as a board member of Bayside Women's Shelter, and her advocacy work in the domestic and family violence space has seen her step into an associate's role with Insight Exchange and on the advisory panel for the Centre for Women's Economic Safety. In her full-time role as Executive Manager Community for Mounties Group, she's currently in the process of leading and implementing a domestic and family violence action plan for the group's 1,400 employees and 2 million members. So welcome, Arely. Thank you very much. So to get tonight's discussion started, Arely, can I start with you, please? What do we mean when we say domestic and family violence?
Hi, Christine. Thank you very much for inviting me to today's session. So to start off with, I guess, we ask, what do we mean when we say domestic and family violence? We understand who perpetrates violence, and violence can be perpetrated by, a family member, a carer, housemate, boyfriend or girlfriend. Women can also commit domestic violence, as do same-sex partners as well. And to understand what domestic violence is, it's behaviour in any of the relationships that is threatening, abusive, violent, coercive or controlling, causing a person to live in fear and to be made to do things against their will. Now, often we think of physical violence as the main form of violence, but there are so many different forms of violence, and we look at things like emotional and psychological abuse. We've got sexualized violence. We have reproductive coercion, things like economic abuse, stalking. There's also technology facilitated abuse as well. And then we also have, spiritual or religious abuse and systems abuse. And if we go into that a little bit more deeply, we can start with physical violence. These things are things like hitting, punching, slapping, kicking, strangling, sometimes hurting pets or damaging items and properties as well. If we look at things like emotional and psychological abuse, here we're looking at things such as verbal abuse, threats of violence and isolation, undermining, the victim's sense of reality. And this can be done, as things like verbal abuse, humiliation, there's threats of violence, might be threats of self-harm or suicide, and blackmail or bribery. When we look at sexualized violence, these are things like sexualized assault and other abusive or coercive behaviours that is of a sexualized nature. And often, I do a lot of talking about the different forms of violence, and things like reproductive coercion are things that a lot of people would not even know that is a form of violence. And, that's when a person is stopped from making their own choices about reproduction. So we look about contraception sabotage, pressuring a person into pregnancy or forcing a person to continue a pregnancy or to terminate one. Often that is often discussed as something that, they weren't aware of. We have stalking and intimidation. So we have things like surveillance, harassment, people attempting to control a person's movements or intimidation of a person or their family. Now, one that is really probably not well known but really problematic in our community today is technology facilitated abuse. And that's whereby a perpetrator will use electronic devices and online services to monitor, control, threaten or harass a person. And again, they can do these in a multiple amount of ways, which is like repeated calls or texts, online harassment, virtual stalking, impersonation. There might be threats through mobile devices, attacking you on social media. And then we look at economic abuse. Again, another one that's really problematic in our community today, but often not really understood really well. And this is denying a person's reasonable financial autonomy or financial support, or accruing debt in their name. And they can do these in a number of ways as well, by controlling access to cash and bank accounts, hiding financial information, sabotaging study or employment opportunities, which we often see in the workplaces, forcing a person to take out debt, or even things like manipulating finances to avoid or reduce child support payments. There's just a couple more. We've got spiritual abuse. And that's when spiritual or religious beliefs are used to scare, hurt, or control a person. And then lastly, we have systems abuse. And that is really closely related to economic abuse, because it involves services and systems to harm and control victims. So they can do this by, delaying court proceedings, hiding information from authorities. They use vexatious allegations and complaints, and also manipulating taxes and evidence and records. So perpetrators of violence will often use services and systems as part of their violence during and after a relationship has ended, which can cause, ongoing financial hardship. So that really shows there's a wide range of different forms of abuse.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ariely. It's I think it's really good for people to understand, all those the different types of ways that people can be exposed to domestic and family violence, which is, certainly expanded from the sense that it was, in the past it was very focused on physical, but that it incorporates all those areas. And so on that, why is it important for the community to increase their understanding and awareness of domestic and family violence?
I guess the really important part here is that because there are so many different forms of violence that a lot of people don't know about, it's really important for all of us to understand the different forms of violence. And it's whether it be as a victim or as a responder, or even as somebody who may be using a form of violence that they weren't even aware was a form. And I always say to people, each one of you here on this webinar are a family member, you're a friend, you're part of a workplace and a wider community. So it's really important that you understand not just the different forms of violence, but also the role that you play as in responding to somebody who may be or has experienced domestic and family violence. However small or large that part may be, it can make all the difference for someone. And I know from my own experiences, a good response will ensure that a victim survivor continues to seek support. However, a bad response may result in a victim survivor, never seeking support again. So, it's great that you're doing this webinar, because we all need to have the understanding in place and be prepared to respond should we need to.
Yeah, thank you, Ariely. Yeah, that's very important that we all have a role, and supporting people that that we know that may be experiencing it. So thank you for sharing. Superintendent Cramsie, I might go to you now. So we've all seen the spate of awful domestic violence incidences, particularly on the news lately, which I have to say is heartbreaking. And you can't help but think we're in the middle of an epidemic at the moment. But just how prevalent is domestic and family violence in New South Wales, and what are the police statistics showing us?
Yeah, well, first of all, Mayor Curry, thank you so much for the invitation tonight, and what a great initiative to share the importance and awareness about domestic and family violence in our local community. I think first and foremost, and Ariely touched on it, but it's important to understand that domestic and family violence does not discriminate. So whilst it may be overrepresented in some community groups, ultimately, regardless of race or socioeconomic status, employment or geographical area, domestic and family violence still occurs at far too high levels. And whether you're living in a nice leafy street or somewhere near the ocean or somewhere else, it really doesn't matter. There's a very good chance that someone in your street, someone in your unit block, or someone that you know has been or may be subject to domestic and family violence. So whilst we talk about the statistics, I'm very cautious about talking about the numbers, because the numbers can only talk about so much. It can only measure so much. Because what it doesn't show us is the high rate of underreported matters of domestic and family violence. What we do know is it will take a victim of domestic and family violence to be subject to some type of violence 26 times before they'll report the matter to the police. So you look at that across our local area, across Sydney area, and then out into the state. That's too many victims of domestic and family violence that have been subject to some form of abuse or assault that haven't reported it to the police. So the statistics don't really show the full picture for us across the state. But what I can say is that the numbers that we know only really reflect a very small proportion of those that are actually involved in domestic and family violence. And that's why it is so important, stepping away from statistics at the moment, but that's why it is so important that if somebody hears or sees something in relation to a domestic violence matter, they need to report it to the police. Because sometimes people are powerless to report to the police themselves. And it may take someone in the community to make that call, so then the police and the other support services can start the important work they do to try and break that cycle of domestic and family violence. And it may be reducing one of those 26 times before someone can intervene and help further assaults. So I'm very cautious about statistics because they only tell us so much. But what I will say, Mayor, is that it's very, very underreported across the board.
Yeah, no, that's an important point. Because so, as you said, so much does go unreported. And so are you, are the nature of incidents changing over time? Are you seeing any emerging trends?
Look, across our area, as you indicated before, there is an increase in reported assaults, and it's up about 13%. And any increase is too much, whether it's 1% or 13%. It doesn't really matter. It's the case that it's on the increase. Now, there may be a couple of reasons for that. One reason may be because of the awareness of domestic and family violence and the fact that we're now bringing it out into the public domain. People feel more comfortable to report the matter to the police or other agencies. So in some respects, an increase in domestic and family violence could be seen as a positive. And I don't say that flippantly, but what I mean is by an increase of reporting, it means an increased ability for the police and other service to take action. One important piece of data to, think about is the really good proactive work that the police are doing in relation to those that have had apprehended domestic and family violence orders taken out against them, commonly known as AVOs taken out against them. So when the court makes an order that an AVO is taken out against someone to restrict their behaviour, the police can go and proactively knock on that person's door, call them up and speak to them and make sure that they understand what the conditions are and make sure that they are complying with their conditions. Because really what we want to do is make sure that someone who has got an AVO taken out against them has a sense of paranoia. And when they have that sense of paranoia because the police are checking up on them and asking about them, it may make them think twice about committing a further domestic violence assault. So over the last couple of years in our area in Bayside, our apprehended violence compliance checks has increased 40%. So that's a significant increase. And what that tells me that the police are being very proactive in making sure that where an apprehended violence order is taken out against someone, we're actually checking that they're complying with those conditions and hopefully reducing the risk of someone else being assaulted in the future.
Yeah, no, that's very important to that the work that's been happening there to really ensure that that it is a very proactive approach, which is great work by the police. And there's that immediate, you talk about there's there's an immediate role in responding to domestic violence incidents and being those first responders and those strategies. Are there any other strategies that the police have adopted to prevent and respond to domestic and family violence?
Look, all the work that we do is done hand in glove with so many other support agencies. It's not something that the police can do on our own. We can't arrest our way out of this problem that we have. There's so many moving parts and so many parts of the community and so many services that all work very hard together in a collaborative sense to reduce domestic and family violence. But one recent really outstanding initiative, which was actually generated by a couple of our police officers using technology, was the Empower You app. So that was designed by a couple of officers who saw a bit of an opportunity to better use technology to support victims. And for those that haven't looked at the app, I really encourage you to do it. It's free, can be easily downloaded from either Google, the Google Store, or Apple. It's not a plug. I'm not allowed to market this type of thing, but what I would really encourage you to do is have a look at it. So what it does, it's an app on the phone where a victim of domestic and family violence has a whole range of local services available to them. So they may be able to reach out, instead of contacting the police when things are at that explosion point, but reach out to a local service for advice or assistance. Also built into that app is that they can create their own diary entries. So when things aren't real good, they can start creating time, date, place about what is happening to them. They can upload some photographs. There might be damage to something that's occurred because of a domestic violence offence, or some injuries that they can then provide to the police later on. Importantly too, it's got a preset text message ability. So if things are starting to simmer away with their partner and things are starting to go downhill, they feel at risk if they were to ring the police, they can press a couple of buttons and it instantly sends a text message to a couple of people that they've nominated in their contacts to indicate that either they'd like them to come to their location, or they would like them to ring the police, or they would like them to come and get them, or bring some other support service to them. So it also has a frequently asked question built into it. So it answers so many questions about the complexities of domestic violence. So I really encourage you to have a look at that. It really is fantastic. It's only been launched for about 6 weeks. It's already had 4,000 downloads from the Apple Store and about 1,200 from Google Play. So I would really, really encourage people online and those on the panel to advocate for this particular app. So that's one way that the police are using technology to really help victims and potential victims of domestic and family violence moving forward.
That's a great initiative. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. So, people listening, Empower You is what it's called, and it's something else, and the ability then to also have collect evidence, if you like, if it's needed in the future, or it's you've got that ability to do that. So yeah, thank you. It's a really important initiative. Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, Sallianne, might move to you. So Sallianne, so Bayside Women's Shelter, it's at the pointy end, as it were, of the domestic violence response. So can you tell us a little bit about Bayside Women's Shelter and the work that you're doing in our community?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for opening up this opportunity to be able to discuss the important work we do at Bayside Women's Shelter in and with our community. Bayside Women's Shelter is a small charity. We're a crisis accommodation refuge for women and children escaping domestic and family violence in the southeast of Sydney. And we're a sister shelter within the Women's Community Shelters Network. The work that we do involves wrapping our arms around, our families so that they can begin, the mums in particular, can really begin to start reimagining a safe and independent future, what that looks like for them. We do it by empowering with dignity, which is so important at this, this end of the services that we provide. The shelter itself is a 6-bedroom shelter, almost always full. In fact, it probably takes us, sort of 10 to 12 hours to, when we've moved a woman into, transitional housing with her family set up in, her first new home. It takes us a little, few hours to make those rooms ready again, but almost always we are full again. The shelter itself has communal living areas, a kitchen, and laundry, as you would imagine, plus a very safe backyard for our families. We opened our front door for the very first time in December 2018, which means we're heading proudly towards our 5th birthday, and we've been able to assist many women and children during that time. And of course, we can't forget our particularly challenging COVID years, which felt like more than 2. We engage with our community in the first and foremost. So from our volunteer governance board through volunteers that help collect donations and food, and our model is very much based around engaging with our community.
And so they normally stay at the shelter, to get that initial support, and then what happens, what support is provided? So can you talk about the next steps, if you like, that Bayside Women's Shelters, how they support women ongoing?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I guess typically our families come to us through referrals from, the services, community services or police, as Superintendent pointed out. And we start at the very beginning in terms of working with the families, the children, in a trauma-informed way, so that we can, help them progress into the things that bring them the best outcomes for their lives. We employ a team of highly trained casework staff that really assist women right from that start through, what looks like normally a 12-week process. But each and every one of our families is treated, in an independent way. So their progress is their choice, and we work with them by wrapping our arms around them to suit their journey. We've got child support roles, within our shelter, so that the children are able to be assisted through their journey in a trauma-informed way. And it's really for us about rebuilding confidence and being able to start from a safe place and let them make plans for their future. Once they leave the shelter, our shelter itself is involved in some transitional housing, which means we help them find, their first safe home. We help them furnish and move and set up within the community, and we connect them to community services.
Yeah, no, very important work, and work that couldn't be done without the support of police organisations and the community, who are so generous, aren't they, in their time, their donations, and that really is the true community support, directly helping women and children. So what impact is the service having on women and families who have left violent and abusive relationships?
Yeah, so I think, as Superintendent said, domestic and family violence doesn't, isn't just in one area or sort of, one person. Our families come from a diverse background of, of culture, of age, of backgrounds, and really we are working with them to walk with them. So we focus on trying to understand what it is that will enable them to set up a financially sustainable future, setting them up for success and supporting them through that. So we've had in the past, women who may have identified a career role that they've not been able to, start during that period of undergoing the trauma, and so we very much help them identify, where they might like training, what sort of educational opportunities are there for them, and really set them up so that they can, start building their self-confidence along the journey that they're looking for. This really is about setting individuals up for their own success. Most definitely not, guiding them in any sort of preset way. It's really just empowering them for their own best outcomes.
Yeah, no, so important because, to start out on your own again, and knowing that there is that ongoing support through crisis accommodation to transitional housing to then, and having the, as you said, the community wrap their arms around you to, as you forge towards a safe life. So, yeah, really important work happening there. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Valentina, thank you for being here. So can you tell us a little bit about To Connect, what you do, where you're based, and yeah, just a little bit about the organisation.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having me. And this is a wonderful forum, and it's wonderful to have so many audience members as well, which is great that people are taking that step to educate themselves. So, To Connect Youth and Community, we're a non-profit youth specialist organisation based in Bayside for over 32 years. We provide a range of services and programs for young people aged 10 to 25 and their families in the Bayside and surrounding areas. Some of our services include providing counselling, case management, which is basically one-on-one and family support, practical support, mentoring, therapeutic and educational groups in schools and in the community. And it's all to empower young people with knowledge, skills, and to meet their goals and make positive changes in their lives. So we provide services which support mental health, improving safety and relationships between young people and families where it is safe, assisting with homelessness and alcohol and other drugs, providing employment and education support for disadvantaged or disconnected young people. So a whole range of different services we do provide. We also provide community education, awareness and development projects around various social issues of concern to young people and their families, such as domestic and family violence, a very important topic that we're all here talking today about. So we do this so that young people can be empowered to create change for positive futures around having more respectful and safer families. One of the special projects that we do run it is the Rethink Anti-Violence Project, and that is funded by the New South Wales Government. We've been running that for a few years now in the area, and the project aims to prevent and reduce domestic and family violence amongst young people and takes that very early intervention approach. So we try to engage with, we do engage with young people and also families as well, from culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and to empower young people to improve respectful relationships, both now and also into the future, with young people having their own families in the future as well, or possibly now as well, for the older ages. So the project takes a peer education approach, which shows evidence that young people seek knowledge from their peers for many sort of social issues such as this. We also have a dedicated domestic and family violence service that supports young people aged between 10 to 25 and their families, where we provide counselling and one-on-one support, those sort of family meetings, which we call case management, for young people who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing domestic and family violence. And we also provide early intervention for young people who may have started using violence in the home or within a relationship, and try to take an early approach with that as well.
Oh yes, that's some really important work there. I guess because there's the two parts, isn't it? It's the impact on young people, particularly that are in a home where there is domestic and family violence, and then it's as they start to young people maneuver into relationships too, and around that respectful relationships and that messaging around, you know, what a healthy, respectful relationship is. And so what are some of the things that you sort of doing there to sort of guide people there?
Yeah, so with the Rethink, it's called Rethink Anti-Violence Project, we aim to prevent and reduce domestic and family violence. So that young people can have more respectful relationships, as you say, both now as well as with the partner, whether it's now or later in the future with their own families. So we actually train up young people from the age group who become anti-violence youth leaders, who then educate their peers and the general community as well on the nature, the effects, and the prevention of domestic family violence, as well as education on what is a respectful relationship, what is a healthy, respectful relationship, what does it look like, and some of the things that Aralee talked about before, the nature of domestic violence, that it's not only physical, it is a whole range of different forms of violence. So we aim to facilitate that knowledge and skills improvement, and we also aim to impact and change attitudes and behaviours which can lead to domestic and family violence amongst young people and in families. These are things like being disrespectful to women and ideas about gender inequality. So there's some of those things that can lead to violence because most often violence is about control, and it is about those things being in the background, that disrespect and that gender inequality of ideas. So the project involves workshops, events, campaigns. You know, we do online work. Young people put all this together, and they cover those sorts of topics like respectful relationships, gender inequality, consent. You know, what does consent look like sexual consent, safety, and bystander intervention. We were talking about, if someone sees or hears or gets told about someone's experience of domestic and family violence, or even someone perpetrating that violence, a young person or even an older person, what to do in those situations and take action. So we also have a dedicated domestic family violence service, as I said, where that's sort of counselling and support work. So that can include things like supporting the family with safety planning, emotional support, providing that education, referrals to other services like the legal help that might be required, referring to places like the Bayside Women's Shelter for housing and other housing supports. Might be referrals for health improvements and also violence prevention for perpetrators. We do support a lot of young people, particularly young men who do show some early stages, but not only early stages, also who are already perpetrating violence, but early stages of violence in particular, where they might be showing violence in the home. So we do support young people to find different ways of dealing with aggression and that violence prevention support to try and stop it in its tracks. I should say. So there's some of the things that we do to take action, because domestic family violence is a very serious issue, and it can have a lot of impacts on children and young people, as well as, of course, any victim and survivor.
Yeah, no, definitely. So a lot of great programs happening there for both victims of survivors as well as perpetrators, which is also key. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunities for people to engage with those, range of support programs there, which is, really important, particularly for our young people who are, manoeuvring into adulthood. And thank you for sharing some great programs that are happening at To Connect there. It's really good to hear. So we might just open up to some questions. So we've got a couple of questions from the forum. So our first question was, how do we get through to the perpetrator and that an AVO is not just a piece of paper? I don't know, Superintendent, are you happy to answer that one?
Yes, I can take that one. I think the first thing to understand is that there is a whole process behind having an application made by the court. It certainly isn't made lightly, and when you have an application that's been granted by a magistrate or a registrar, it gives some indication of how serious those restrictions are. So when an application is made and then granted, the police officer will then go and meet up or go and serve the application on the perpetrator, who has the AVO taken out against them, and the police officer will explain it to them in great detail. Now, at the bottom of that document, it talks about what the penalties are and the possible outcomes and consequences if the apprehended violence order is breached. So there should be no misunderstanding by the person who has the AVO taken out against them or anybody else involved that an apprehended violence order is just a piece of paper. There has been many, many people who have breached apprehended domestic violence orders and have been put before the court and have ended up with custodial sentences because the magistrates and the courts and the judiciary understand the complexities and the dangers around domestic and family violence. And if somebody is going to breach an apprehended violence order, it demonstrates a further propensity to commit further violence. So I'm very comfortable that where people breach apprehended violence orders, they're put before the court, and a lot of the time they'll end up with custodial sentences.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. We've just got some other questions. So, how do local services link with community legal supports for victims of domestic violence? Did you want to maybe take that, Valentina or Sallianne?
Sure, I can go as well. And then, yeah. So we all do work together, just so the community knows that all of us here on this panel, but also a range of other services in the background who aren't necessarily here presenting, we are all very connected with each other. You know, we're often talking to council, we're talking to the police, we're talking to the women's shelters. You know, we're all connected and we are all working together. So we do make those referrals between each service. So if we come across, you know, a domestic and family violence situation, we would support the family to seek help, the victim or the survivor or the perpetrator, whoever is looking for the support.
Thanks,
Sallianne?
Valentina. Yeah, I'll just add to that. So our casework staff, our caseworkers, that's their role, is to determine what sort of assistance our families require, and we definitely connect with all, you know, local services in order to deliver those sort of services, you know, appropriately as needs be. So most definitely, it's a true connection to local community.
Yeah, definitely. That's thank you. And we've just got another one. Is there any progress being made in the area of digital stalking and harassment in relation to linking to AVOs or Superintendent?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one as well.
Thank you.
As Airlie quite eloquently explained earlier, stalking and harassment can take a whole range of forms. There's obviously the traditional sense of physical stalking, but we are seeing more and more a type of digital stalking, whether it's online through social media or through other mechanisms. There's been a really good another application or process that's been launched very shortly, collaboration between New South Wales Police and the Commonwealth Bank, and it's called Abuse in Transaction. So when we see some comments in free text when transfer of money occurs between two different parties, there's some really clever behind the scenes processes that can identify particular types of words, particular types of themes, the frequency of small amounts of money, which may just be an indicator into a type of financial abuse. So that technology is also starting to be rolled out, and that may then commence an investigation that may lead to an offence being proven where someone is being abused online or abused through their partner through artificial means because of the transaction of data, financial transaction of data. But the police are very, very aware that stalking now doesn't just involve the traditional means, as I indicated. And I'm very happy to make sure that if somebody is a perpetrator or knows someone is being a victim of domestic and family violence and being stalked online or through other means, and they should be really reporting that to the police and let the police start an investigation.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And we've got another question. Thanks so much to the audience for asking questions. I think it's important to be able to understand and know what to do. So how do you think we can break the stigma behind reporting the behaviours of others in our society? Would someone like to take that? So breaking the stigma behind reporting behaviours. I guess that sort of comes down to, traditionally there's been in the past very much, it's a private or it's a family matter. And so people have sort of, if you like, minded their own business. But so how, I guess how do we start to, things like the forum, greater awareness and education start to change those behaviours. And I think it's about, really looking at domestic and family violence as a societal issue, and that we all play a role in problem solving and, and working to and preventing domestic and family violence. Did you want to add something there, Aralee?
Yeah, I also think it's when in everyday life we need to call out behaviours that aren't appropriate. I think, often things are just let slide, and it's calling out behaviours in real time in front of your friends and in front of other people, so that we as a society start to agree that these behaviours aren't okay. And I think it's the little things in everyday life that we can particularly, comments made about someone or things in jest, but it's not appropriate. So, I mean, I often say this when I was working with my team and staff, is that we need to call that behaviour out in real time. And I think that is, it takes time, but I think we need to start thinking about doing that now.
Yeah, great point, Aralee, definitely. And, looking for that and calling it out. So to the panel more broadly, so what can our community do to help, with calling it out, we're educating ourselves? Are there other things that we can do as a community to help prevent domestic and family violence? Valentina?
I think that's a big one. What Aralee mentioned, I had that on my notes to make sure that I mentioned that we do need to challenge the attitudes and behaviour that we do see amongst our friends, amongst our family, amongst neighbours, that enable or excuse domestic and family violence. We had our group of youth leaders actually design a project called Calling It Out, and they made some animation images to go on social media as well as posters. So, and it's giving examples there to young people about how to do those things in a safe way. So, just speaking up when or if you hear something that is, not that is sexist, that's not gender equality, that's disrespectful, that's abusive, that is violence. Like I think a lot of us have seen that there's a national TV ad where the young man is disrespecting in the video in the TV ad and disrespecting their sister, I think it is, and the parents can stop this and educate that young person about it, how to be more respectful. So we can challenge. People, that we do feel safe to do so with, our friends and families. So, and also we can seek help if you are experiencing or using domestic and family violence, or if, as Commander said, if you hear, or Superintendent, sorry, if you hear or see it. as a bystander with friends or family or neighbours, report it. This includes, supporting others to get help. So, maybe going with a family member to the police to get that help and to report it. If you're a parent or you have or know of a child or young person who's starting to show violence or aggression in the home, seek help early, get them connected with a service like To Connect or other services out there. There's incidences where it's young people now, particularly young men, using violence against a sibling or against a parent, especially a female parent. So, the faster that we catch on to these things, the faster that we stop these things in its tracks, at those early stages, but also at the later stages, that we can have an impact. So, being a victim or survivor, reach out to someone you trust, contact a professional for support. You've got the right to be safe and free from violence. And if you're using domestic and family violence, you can take responsibility for your actions and seek help to change your behaviour. And you've got the choice to stop hurting others and yourself as well.
And that's a very important. We all have the right to a safe life. So yeah, very, very important. So we've got some great services. We've got 2 online. I know we've got other amazing services in Bayside as well, which are doing really good work. So what can people do who want to support our services so that they can continue to do the good work? What are some of the ways that people could support the services? Sallianne, I might go to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I might just add to, I think a part of that sort of opening up the discussion in the community is something that as the shelter we're looking to do all the time in terms of getting out and showing that there's a structure and a safe way to sort of take that initiative to get yourself into a safe position. So that is something that's most definitely on our shelter, sort of out and about in community groups talking and I do find when I'm speaking to groups of people that they say, this is a growing problem. We've in the past, we've not heard it before. So I think that whole exposure and awareness building is really, really important to keep, encouraging people to be safe. In terms of helping the shelter specifically, I guess there's practical things like following our socials so that you can be aware of the activities that we're involved in, subscribing to our newsletter, just a newsletter that keeps our supporters updated with the work that we're doing. I think another practical thing is getting involved and walking with the council walk, which I think you'll touch on later in November, the walk against domestic and family violence. And that gives us the ability to really demonstrate to the community that we're not going to walk past this standard because we don't accept it. So important and really a visual, support. There's always a fully tax deductible donation, but also in particular with the shelter, we have volunteering opportunities that you can connect through our website. If you've got some spare time that might be able to help us. But I think most of all for all of us is really just to be there for family and friends and for your workmates. And if you do see something, really stand up and talk. Enable them to talk about it and seek help.
Fantastic. Valentina, probably some similar things. Is there anything additional there that you wanted to draw attention to how people could support?
I think similar things. I think the big one we've already mentioned is just to educate yourself, educate others. There's information on the 1-800-RESPECT website to get more information about domestic and family violence, because we can only cover so much today. But also sort of answering a little bit again to that earlier question about how can we encourage people to report it as well. There's just to remember as well that there's something called the cycle of violence. So, firstly, also another point I want to make, that young people who not only experience violence, but also who witness domestic and family violence, that they may see it happening in the family. There's a lot of suffering that happens for children and young people. So there's physical, mental health problems, developmental, educational difficulties, relationships and social issues. And that's where I was going to pick up the cycle of violence. Young people who witness or experience domestic violence might have more distorted views of themselves, others, and relationships. They have trouble forming healthy relationships, trust and intimacy and communication and respectful relationships. And they may be more likely to repeat the cycle of violence in their own intimate relationships, or become victims or perpetrators as well. So just to educate yourselves, I think keep educating yourselves, get involved with anything that's happening in the community, such as the walk. We've had young people on the streets of Bayside, doing chalk art promotions around, early help seeking, where young people are sort of designing artworks and promoting the 1-800 respect number, promoting respectful relationships, getting involved with any of that, and just promoting it in a positive way, whether it's with your families, on social media, sharing that information that comes across your social media platforms, getting things out there so we can all change society for the better, to have more respectful relationships and reduce and stop domestic violence in the future, we hope.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you, Valentina. Well, that sort of wraps up our panel conversation, our first one. So thank you all so much for your time and expertise this evening. I think you've sort of helped us all gain a better understanding of the impact of domestic and family violence that it's having in our community, and how we can all play a part to create and maintain a safe and welcoming community. So thank you all so much for being here. I just want to sort of just briefly touch on, the role of council providing, a fundamental role with provision of local services in relation to family domestic violence. We've, we take every opportunity we can to raise awareness of the impact of domestic and family violence in our community, and some of the things that we're doing with the support of all our groups. For example, last year we participated in the UN 16 Days of Activism Against Gender Violence for the first time, which ran from the 25th of November to the 10th of December, which we'll be doing again this year. And those 16 days aim to increase community awareness of gender violence. This year, as you touched on, Sallianne, we had a walk last year, which was really good, just to have community come together. And I know at that event we also heard from we heard Aralie's story, and Superintendent, it was in partnership with St George Police Area Command, and we're doing that again this year because, as many of you have mentioned, it is about continuing to increase awareness, education and action, so everybody can play a role in that. We've also updated our draft domestic and family violence action plan, and this is a comprehensive framework of how council will respond to domestic violence. So it's the first one adopted by Bayside Council, and sets some really good targets, and that's currently out on exhibition. So I encourage you to jump on to have your say on our website, and provide advice, because we're really keen to hear everyone's thoughts and ideas in how we can all work together. And I think the other one is around, our public space. How do we make our, being conscious of that too? And we want to hear, especially from women, about feeling safe. And one of the initiatives that we got funding from the New South Wales government was to improve women's safety in transport hubs. So we hosted a number of workshops around our train stations in the LGA, so we can better understand safety needs for women in these locations. And we're currently working, and some of the things that came out was better lighting and better transitional movement. So councils now working through some of those things. So all these ideas are really important. So, you know, anytime, feel free to share ideas, and, you know, we want to hear from everyone. And look, lastly, if tonight's session has raised any issues for you, or if you know someone experiencing domestic violence, please again contact 1800 RESPECT for confidential information and support. As you can see, there's you know, a range of different support services, and council will have a number of those services as well available on our website, that, you know, from counselling to crisis accommodation, whatever it is you or a family member or friend may need. So again, thank you everyone for being part of this first conversation, and you know, we'll certainly, I'm sure we'll be back again in the future, and continuing to have these conversations. And thank you for everyone that came along tonight to learn and understand more. Have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much.